But for those with ability and capacity, I've always believed that there's a huge amount of space on top. The crowding is only on the bottom. So today you need to create not merely islands of excellence in India. You need to expand the base. You will have the black sheep in those expanded bases. But then I'd rather trust the market more than I trust the government. Now look at what has happened in some of these areas. The governments must contribute, the center must contribute, the states must contribute. I am not saying that they have no responsibility. But I am conscious of the realistic limitation of the state. When I went to school in Delhi, there were a handful of schools which you could call institutions of excellence. Today it's in hundreds. And this transformation into hundreds has not taken place because the Delhi government has set up schools. This transformation into hundreds, and I can tell you the schools in India, a very large number of them have an extremely good academic standard. The kind of products that they are producing could be as good as the best in the world. The environment of that education. Barring some of your top higher educational institutions, the colleges and the universities. In fact, if I were to compare school to school, the schools in India, at least a large number of schools in India, I'd rate them better than their counterparts abroad, even in the developed world. I'm afraid I can't say that about colleges and universities. And therefore, we may be struggling to bring them up. And I think we are at a stage today where, look at the reality of the Indian economy in mind. There may be all legitimate issues, how democratization takes place, how transparency takes place, how participation of teachers in decision making takes place. These may be all internal management issues. But I think the first thing you require today is to hugely expand this space, for which the resource must come from wherever the resource is available. There is resource with the private sector in India, there is resource with the government, and therefore some ideological slots, if we get tightened into those slots, oh, this is privatization. At least I can say for myself and a lot of people who think like me, I see a role of a state, but a reasonable role of the state. I am not a Marxist, I am opposed to that ideology. And therefore, I cannot wittingly or unwittingly push myself into a situation where I say the state has to do everything. So the resource must come from within India. How did school education in India start besides government schools? The religious institutions, the Arya Samaj started it, the Gurdwara started it, Sanatan Dharam started it, the missionaries started it. And it started with the participation of religious bodies. And then society had a role. And in the last 20 years, private enterprise also had a role. Now when this takes place, there will be problems. But in a bid to find a solution to those problems, we don't have to create a situation where this expansion comes to a standstill. Now, as far as barring a few causes, I see one silver lining. And that one silver lining is capacities have increased. In some courses across the country, the capacities have become surplus. Now, the capacities becoming surplus have had two advantages. Those with a moderate percentage also get access to these institutions. In the courses where capacities have become surplus, engineering courses is an example, the fee structures have become more competitive. Capitations have disappeared. And wherever we have kept the capacities, dental courses, capacities have become surplus, so the capitation structures have come down. But in the medical courses, what we did was, in a too restrictive a regime, that is one area which is impacting healthcare, which is relating to inadequacy of doctors in India. So our healthcare system is suffering, as a result of which the tight regulation, you see, the tragedy of India is also that courts think that they can solve every problem. So in a bid to give a job to every retired judge, they said fees will be fixed by retired judges now in every state. So in every state, some judges got jobs after retirement. They fixed tight structured fees. And I don't think a single medical college is abiding by that. They charge that fee by check and they are charging capitation. So when you speak to those colleges, they say, well, if a course costs me X amount, and that committee headed by an honorable judge wants me to charge 1/3 of that amount, I can't pay out of my own pocket, so with some element of profitability, I'm charging the rest by capitation. Such controls will lead to unfair practices. But the day you have surplus capacities, it's the colleges which will be running after students, even at moderation. Therefore, we are not at a stage where the Indian economy, Indian society is not at a stage where we should become control freaks. So our legislations, if it tightens and controls everything and we start pointing, of course the problems do exist. We are not in a utopian world where the problems will resolve themselves. But today your challenge is you need to expand capacities. You need systems to check unfair practices. You need tightening of the curriculum. You need the best academics. I see in the 6th Pay Commission there has been a slight improvement, but I'd personally love to see a higher improvement. Unless we can create an environment where people are incentivized to become teachers and professors, you won't get the best into the educational mainstream. And therefore, not only must there be people with a great academic proficiency, the best must be incentivized to join this profession. So I would personally get out of this bureaucratic mindset which governments have, which say you must cap it and the highest which anybody must get is what an officer in the civil service gets. Nobody can get more than that. Now there are a very large number of institutions where you have these limitations and therefore you are not able to get the very best. Law colleges across the country, Mohan has been the director of at least 2 very eminent law institutions, and I'm sure he'll verify this. The biggest challenge is to get the best into the legal teaching or medical teaching, because if they went into the legal profession or the medical profession, they probably had a much better financial future. So you'll have to at some stage give an element of flexibility. We have not reached a stage where our system can be a chooser. We are still at a stage where we have to expand the base. Now, obviously, there will be people with institutions which are substandard. Substandard can be closed by the government, but substandards must be rejected by the market. Because the moment you have surplus capacities available, nobody looks at then substandard institutes. It's like products. It's happened all over the world. We are not the first country in the world where this is going to happen. And you probably need to induct the best. I think the next at least 2 decades, if I have to look at the population of India, if I have to look at this whole desire to transfer people from sectors where they are underemployed, unemployed, living at poverty levels, India needs trained academic human resources. They need it in various fields. So you must be linked to various professions. Now these initiatives which are being taken all over the country for skill development. Now skill development will come out of educational institutions. So if you are able to train people who can't get into specialized higher education into areas of skill development, you are going to service the economy and you are going to enrich your own future with that. At one stage we used to feel, I remember when I was in this university, the favorite subject we used to discuss at all such meetings used to be the brain drain. Today I don't hear that word. Because today you need to be a brain bank. and you have an ability to become a brain bank. And therefore, I think rather than look at the problem of higher education in India only from the point of view of internal management may be somewhat inadequate. You did mention about these legislations which are being planned. I think they need to be closely looked at. Some of them are extremely controversial, so there needs to be a greater debate. They can't be just forced down the system. Some of them may be well-intentioned also. But I think one which at least I find extremely difficult in accepting is this new concept which has arisen within the present government of creating overarching bodies and the state to take control. Now it's almost happened in the medical, dental, it's happening in the architecture field, it's happening in the other technical institutions, it's happening to law, and it's expanding as a principle to all areas. Those bills are before the parliament. And I think this whole concept of management by the academics and their increased role in that management, all the professions in some cases, I think has to be revived back. And this thinking of the real power lying with the state, I think has extremely dangerous connotations. If real power lies with the state is managed by politics. And one fact which is true of politics, when I suggested the best must be attracted to academics, the best are not being attracted to politics. So the management is going in the hands of those who are not the very best, because one of the greatest challenges India faces is that the power of politics is immense and the stature of men who man it probably has no nexus with it. And therefore this is one of the great dangers of India. Now, taking away all power and vesting it in that overarching body, which may comprise of small people, I think has far greater dangers. When private people commit a mistake, when academics commit a mistake, when doctors and lawyers commit a mistake, there are enough institutions, courts are there, their own bodies are there, which can check them. But when governments commit a mistake, their arrogance never permits them to accept that it's a mistake. And therefore, it's extremely dangerous, and I think this is one area which must be strongly resisted. In the nutshell, if I'm saying, there can be dangers of unfair practices, high fee, inadequate quality with private sector entering this field in a big way. But then the entry of private institutions outside the government in schools has helped India. I don't see any reason why the same experiment can't be replicated if that were to also continue along with government participation in higher education. Because if you only depended on government, I think you'll be back to the 1970s. And that's a situation I completely dread. Thank you.